I have an hour to talk about roadmap, and believe it or not, that's not enough time. We're gonna spend the first little part of this session going through and kind of explaining how features get into the pipeline and where you will find information about new things, depending on how far out it is. But we're going to probably spend the majority of our time looking at the things that are in the short-term pipeline. We're going to be going through a Teams feature guide that I think you're all going to absolutely love as a great way to keep up to date with what's coming in the short term and what's just arrived and what you need to know about it. For our session today, the 5 different areas we're going to run through is just a real brief overview of how the things you want to see in Teams end up on the roadmap. I'm going to teach you how to use the publicly facing roadmap. I'm going to explain that there is a non-disclosure agreement version of the roadmap available to you as a customer with an NDA in place that has to get presented by the account team or your Modern Workplace CSM, which that's kind of a medium term look at what's coming. And then we're going to talk about the message center, which not everybody has access to. And then finally, this Teams feature guide, which is filled with information that we've pulled out of the message center and tried to put in context for anybody who's deep into using Teams as a champion or as a program manager for adoption. Sound like a plan?
Nash, we could see your slides. Do you want to go in presenter mode?
I do, but I want it. I'm going to make it show up on this monitor, and we'll try again. There we go. Bloop bloop.
Perfect.
All right, and we'll switch to a full screen view of the right thing here, and we'll make it pretty. All right, so just the first thing is I want to spend a couple of seconds making sure that you realize that the features that we decide to put in Teams is not just Microsoft imagining what we hope people will like. While that certainly does exist, right? We've got leadership in the engineering group that makes the big decisions. Realize that a lot of what drives that decision making comes from the people using the product through a bunch of different listening mechanisms. And I highlight 3 of them here. We've got a lot of ways that you can go and influence our roadmap with the things that you need to go and get your job done to make these tools be effective at helping you achieve your organization's mission. First and foremost is any user can go to the existing user voice site to either submit feedback or vote up existing feedback. That site is there today for you to use. Do whatever you want with it. Put the information there. Do realize, though, that we are planning at some point later this year to transition to a different tool. But for the time being, this is the place where we get our mass feedback from customers. So if there's a thing that isn't already on the roadmap where you're like, man, I really wish Teams did this or worked that way, go ahead and put it there. And realize that you can kind of game the system. If you've got 10 work friends that all go in and hit that upvote button, or you go out onto Twitter and say, hey, wouldn't it be great if, and share a link to that user voice entry you created, it only really takes a handful of people upvoting this before it ends up getting looked at right away by the product team. So if you and 10 of your closest friends hit that upvote, it's probably going to get reviewed in the weekly engineering team review meeting that week. Doesn't mean they're going to do it, but it does mean it's going to get some attention. So realize that you do have a great voice, just as anybody off the street can do. Go to that user voice site and submit your feedback there. The other 2 additional ones, though, are as a Microsoft customer, if you have a unified or premier support agreement, working with your customer success account manager or the customer engineers that you work with, they are one of the listening mechanisms for feedback. So anytime you have a support case open where a change to the product would be helpful in that case, they've got a way to go and escalate that. So please, if you've got unified or premier support, realize that you can use them as a feedback mechanism to the engineering group. And then finally, the account team. So whether your sales folks or your post-sales folks, like us Modern Workplace customer success managers, one of our jobs is to go and act as the voice of the customer and make sure that the things you bring to us get escalated internally at Microsoft. So do share that feedback with your Microsoft account team. And look for keywords like, okay, I will escalate that to engineering. Again, that's not a promise that we'll be able to deliver that feature anytime soon, but it is one of the ways that we can go and influence that roadmap. We're not going to go into any more depth on this, but there is a lot more information about how you can effectively use these tools that if you work with a Modern Workplace CSM, I'm sure they would love to share that story with you one-on-one. All right, so once we've decided to go and build something, right? Hey, we're going to release this feature. Engineering starts working on the process of designing the feature, of what it's going to be and what it needs to be at initial release. And once they've actually got that design figured out and they've decided to give the hours to the engineers who need to go and build it, it typically ends up getting added to the M365 public roadmap. What you'll see on the public roadmap is features that once they're actually committed to delivering that feature, they're going to go and create this entry. And it can give you kind of that medium-term look out ahead. I'm going to pull up this website and show a couple of key things here because I want to show, especially for government customers, how to use this effectively. So I'm going to pop open that link there, and it's going to bring me to the main page. There are some links right at the top on how to use this and how to give some feedback on improving the roadmap, and then give you the ability to go and just see the information that's been recently added. But if I scroll down, one of the most important things that I want to show as we're trying to figure this out is that we have the ability to search for a particular thing. So if you already know, hey, this webinars feature or this spotlighting feature is coming, when's it coming? We can go and do the search, but there are also filters on the left. And the two filters I want to highlight today are the product filter named Microsoft Teams. And I keep switching tabs here when I mean to zoom in. Try that again. If I launch Zoom it will zoom in better. So the Microsoft Teams filter on the left, and if we scroll down, the cloud instance filter. If you're using the Office 365 Government Community Cloud, do realize that oftentimes features are released not at the same time as our regular worldwide commercial customers get. So there may be different dates there, although on the Teams front, I think you'll notice that the majority of the features released recently either went to both simultaneously or had a fast follow, where they finished rolling out to the commercial tenants and then immediately started rolling out to GCC. But this GCC tag on the cloud instance lets us go and find only the things that have been identified for going to the government community cloud, and it makes it a lot easier for us to find the right information we need for what's going on impacting us. All right, there's a lot more to this public roadmap. I'm gonna not go into too much more detail on it unless people have specific questions. Was there anything in the Q&A that we want to make sure we address in the live broadcast?
Not at this time.
Perfect. Then we're going to roll on to get to the even more interesting things. So if the M365 public roadmap is kind of that medium term, we kind of cross over into both a short and medium term with the NDA version of the roadmap. The NDA version of the roadmap is updated monthly and includes information for this quarter and the next quarter as we're looking at the calendar year. So if you were to get a briefing on the NDA roadmap, it would show you not only what we plan to release before the end of June, but it would also have things in there that we plan to release by the end of October at this point. And they'll, as we get towards the end of a quarter, you'll see that list get really big again as they end up adding the next quarter's set of things. If you ever had one of these briefings before, you realize that you may want to get this into at least like a quarterly cadence to go and look at it. I think they just updated it with the next quarter's information in the past week or two. So if you had only seen it through the middle of summer, now we've got end of summer and early fall in there. This is a list that is pretty good to stay up to date with if you're a Teams program manager within an organization or an M365 program manager, so that you know what to be preparing for and can start planning how you're going to go and educate your employees and help them get the benefit out of these changes. Since it's an NDA thing and I can't guarantee everybody's under NDA on today's session, I'm not going to bring it up and show it, but this is definitely something to reach out to your account team, like your Modern Workplace CSM, and see if they can schedule a briefing for you. Okay. All right, now we're getting closer, right? The M365 Message Center is the place where we officially notify your organization that a major change or a major new feature is coming. Typically, we try to get major change announcements in there a minimum of 30 days before they start rolling out. But that, that's not a promise, that's a typical. Some minor features you might only see a little bit of notice. Some major changes you might see several months worth of notice. And you will see those Message Center posts get updated as we get closer to release date in case there are any extra caveats or they end up having to shift the rollout start date. This is the source of truth for your tenant. If you've got information here and it's not adding up to what you see, that's the sort of thing that you can open a support case with to go and be like, hey, what's going on for our tenant? But the big challenge of this is that it does require permissions to go in and see. And so while IT roles may have access to this, some of the business area roles that need to know about this information may or may not have direct access. In order to see the Message Center, you do need at least the Message Center reader role, and then lots of other roles come with those permissions. I'm just going to quick bring up and show the Message Center in my GCC demo tenant. It's part of the M365 Admin Center. And we're going to see that we have a list of Message Center posts the last day it was updated. You can filter these by service. So if I wanted to just look at particular things, we absolutely could do that. But we do have some other tags on here which can be really useful, like the things that are going to have an end user impact. Yep, they're going to have a tag on there. If it's a new feature versus an updated feature, you can use the tags to kind of sort through this very long list of new things that are coming to M365. If I pick one of them, I'm going to pick on the multi-spotlights coming to Microsoft Teams. You're going to see a blade come out from the right-hand side with more detailed information. Right, and the standard format you're going to see is a message summary that's going to include a when will this happen, how will this affect your organization, and then what do I need to do to prepare. And a lot of times it's going to say, hey, you might want to communicate this new capability. So that's what that looks like. If you want to get this information out of the Message Center, there is a share button where you can send it as an email to yourself or other people. And that's a great way to just get this content copied and pasted out of here if you want to go and do something else with it. Additionally, the Message Center can be synced to a planner board. So if you want to go and do more things beyond that with like Power Automate to pull that into a ServiceNow instance and do something with it, that would be the mechanism to do that. But there are ways to get this information out of the Message Center if you need to share it with the group or with a larger group than who has access to it. All right, I'm not going to go into I'm going to go into one more piece of detail here. If you are in your Message Center, you can go and click on Preferences, and there's a tab that says Email. This is a really great thing to call out. You can have the Message Center send you an email whenever there's a major update, and send you a weekly digest of all of the changes or just some of the changes. So if you do have access to the Message Center, rather than having to remember to go and check it every week, you can have it send you an email. This is a really great feature if you do have access to the message center to have set up so that you actually see the information when you needed to see it. You don't miss a major update until after it's rolled out, and then you're like, oh shoot, why didn't Microsoft tell me? And then you go look in your message center and realize we did like 3 months ago. The email makes that process a lot easier. All right, I'm going to skim the Q&A. I don't think there's anything more we want to talk about in the message center. And we're going to go on to the meat and potatoes that I think people came here for. So, all right, that looks good. All right, our last and most important piece here for today is the Teams feature guide for GCC. And I'm actually going to click this link and pop open the latest edition of it in a second as well. And if one of my peers would be so kind as to go and make an announcement with the link in it, with that short link for attendees so that they've got something they can directly click on, I would appreciate that. But this Teams feature guide is just a PDF file, but it's a PDF file that gets updated weekly right now with information from the message center that the state and local government modern workplace CSMs are kind of going through and vetting. And we're using this to solve a couple of different problems. Number one, it's publicly available, so you don't need the message center role to be able to go and see it. And then number two, the message center tells the time range when we plan to roll it out, but we don't actually say when it's rolled out in the message center. We work with the Teams engineering group to go and figure out, hey, when did this thing actually go live? Then actually go test it to make sure it worked in the GCC demo tenant, and then we'll actually go and update the slide deck with what got released this week. So you can actually follow along the, hey, what's coming, and hey, what's brand new. Now, realize that this is modern workplace CSMs doing this work, and it's updated weekly, so you might have had a change in the past week or so in your message center that isn't reflected there yet. And it is a Microsoft field role doing this. We're not directly hearing from engineering all of the details on it. So if you do ever see something where it's not matching what you see in your tenant or what you would expect to see in your tenant, do please reach out to your modern workplace CSM to let them know so we can get those things fixed. But man, it's turning into a really, really useful piece of information for organizations to know what's coming. And so that's where we're going to spend the rest of our time is walking through what's in this guide. As of, we updated it late yesterday, so that you know what's coming in the and what's recently been released to Teams for government community cloud customers. Okay, taking a breath. I'm gonna quick look at chat here. It looks like we're keeping caught up on the Q&A. Glenn, thank you so much for publishing that short link. All right, love it. And if you have any questions as we're going through this about a particular feature, whether it's actually like what's the roadmap say for timeline or any caveats around it, do throw those into the Q&A. We've got a couple of people from the customer success unit here that are going to be monitoring the Q&A, and we'll try to reply to them directly. And then Rajiv, Laura, Glenn, Saite, just come off mute if there's anything I should cover for the whole group, okay? All right, so the first section you'll notice in this deck is what's just been released this quarter. And this is a new deck. If you haven't seen this before, we just started publishing this in the last month or so. And so you'll watch us kind of develop this out as we're going along. We haven't transitioned from one quarter to the next yet. We'll still figure that out as we get there of how we're going to keep the old information or not. But it is a great way for us to go and see like what's recently been released and then what's the latest intel we have on future features. When we go and look in the shipped section, you'll notice that the purple bar on the bottom is moved off to the right, and it's got an actual date there. When we go down to the future section, you'll see the purple bar on the left with the anticipated date. So you got a nice visual indicator of has it actually shipped or not. And we are trying to include the information for both the message center post that this information first came from, and the public roadmap ID for each of these features as they come out. Now, sometimes we'll have a feature that doesn't have a roadmap ID or doesn't have a message center post, depending on how the feature group decided to do their communications, but we're going to try to bring all that information together in one spot. We're going to give you a short summary of what the feature is and why it exists, and try to have some sort of a screenshot of how it works to make it easier for you to understand that yourself, and to make it easier to communicate with other people in your organization what's new and why they should care about it. As we quick skim through this, we're going to see that there's a lot, right? The Meet Now link in Teams went live on April 1st. We got some new lobby settings as of April 13th for being able to just limit to people in my organization, excluding people who are guests in your tenant or are on your federation trusted list, to make it easier to lock down meetings, especially public meetings, using the lobby options. End user app pinning, right? So if you've got either you've got third-party apps available or custom apps available in Teams. It used to be that you could only have an administrator add it to that left rail in Teams. Now any user can right-click on that app and pin it just for themselves. Super useful if you've got things like a Learning Pathways app or third-party apps like the new ArcGIS Maps app to let end users go and customize and bring the things that they need easy access to right into the left rail. That one came out to GCC on April 13th. Also early in April on that third-party apps front, the ability to go and use the Manage Apps pane came to GCC. So if you've ever tried to do third-party apps or custom apps in GCC before, you would notice that there were differences in the instructions for government tenants versus non-government tenants. A lot of those differences have gone away now that we have the Manage Apps pane. It makes it easier for us to go and get some statistics about what third-party apps are being used in the tenant, and makes it a lot easier to go and unblock and unblock third-party apps, as well as easier to publish custom apps. So if you've built a custom app like any of the Teams app templates, or you're trying to make a custom app for the Learning Hub, makes it really easy for you to go and publish that into your tenant. Whereas before you had to like download a file and then upload it again. It's a little bit of a clunky process. Live profile cards are back in GCC as of April 19th. So if you hover over the profile card of any user, it will expand out and give you easy access to go and start another chat. We saw a little bit of that when they were doing when John was doing pop-out chats on the previous session. Makes it a lot easier to see people's key contact details, like department and company, if that's set in Azure Active Directory, as well as get their phone number, their email address, or go and start a chat with them. Meeting creation and expiration policies. We did a message center post to let people know more about how this works in general, as well as give a little bit of control in some of the back-end meeting policies for how that meeting expiration for scheduled meetings would work. Probably won't impact a lot of organizations, but there were a handful that needed a little more granular control about this. Speaker attribution and live captions for GCC, real fresh one here, right? So when you're having your internal meetings, we saw this if you were on the first session of the day during the accessibility piece and you're using the Teams meetings live captions feature, you will now have speaker attribution for the internal folks from your meeting. Love this feature. If you were ever using the live captions before, it was just really a stream of consciousness text. And if 2 or 3 people were going back and forth and you use those live captions to try to follow the conversation, not having speaker attribution made that hard to do. Super easy now that we've got speaker attribution in there today. There is the ability to go and opt out of being identified in live captions with speaker attribution if that's a privacy concern you have today as well. All right, view-only attendees. Go for
Nash, can I interrupt you real quick? Just
Absolutely.
we have a quick question from Q&A on that live transcript. For those who are not seeing it in their tenant, when was it released or is it still rolling out? And do the admins need to do anything to make it available?
Okay, so to be crystal clear, this slide is talking about speaker attribution in live captions. Live transcripts is a different feature, and the latest we have today, if I can flip back to here, live transcription as a feature is slated to come out by early June, according to the Message Center right now. I would have done it in my PDF there, but I would have to download it to go into the Control F there. But there is a slide. Let's do that actually. Let me switch to this guy. I'll download it and open it as a PDF just so that it's easier to search. And transcript. There we go. So the live transcription one right now is on page 51, and it says late May through early June. Now, when we first announced this, I think we said that live transcription wouldn't support speaker attribution, but that's because we originally thought we'd get live transcripts a lot earlier than we're getting it. I think now it does say we will get speaker attribution in there. Now, to specifically answer the question of do we have to do anything for live transcription, I do believe this is released off by default. You will need to enable in order to have a, yep. So it is off by default. That policy does exist today. So if you want this to be on, you could go into your meeting policy and turn that on right now. A lot of organizations did have this policy turned on because it's the same policy that controlled whether or not you could do transcripts inside of using the stream transcription. But yeah, there we go. Did that answer the question you saw in the Q&A, Laura?
I think
Awesome.
that's very thorough. I want to interrupt you one more time since I've stopped you already and just plant the seed. I don't think it's in your slides, but the other question was about the timeline on Teams webinar. So you can either keep that for the end or wherever you plan. If you were planning to fit that in, I just want to let you know that's a question.
Well, I'm going to just keep going through this deck and we'll take it wherever the Q&A goes. So if people, there's a lot of people on this call, I want you to get out of this what you need. So feel free to look at this slide deck on your own and see if it answers your question. And if not, just throw it in the Q&A. We'll definitely answer those. Webinar is not on this slide deck right now. And that's because the slide deck is based off of information you see in the Message Center. Like that's our trigger to go and create a slide and start putting information in there. And while there was a Message Center post for the webinar feature in your Message Center for a brief period of time, they right away updated it saying, oops, our apologies, the GCC cloud will end up with a different timeline and we will be replacing this Message Center post. So right now, webinars is coming, but we don't have a publicly stated date on the public roadmap. And honestly, we're looking at potentially it being June or late June, early July at the earliest. I will preface all of this of, hey, there's a lot of slides on here of things that are coming shortly, but please do realize that a lot of these features are at risk because of the COVID situation in India. We have a lot of employees who are out on bereavement leave right now, a lot of employees who are out with sick family members. And so Microsoft as an engineering organization is prioritizing which of these things we can push the timeline out and which ones we need to prioritize making sure that they come in. So when you do see a date here, this is the best information that we have at a time, and they are absolutely subject to change. And maybe I should have put that at the very beginning. Please, 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 when you're planning a future event or activity using Teams, plan it with the product as it exists today. If you've got an event that's going to happen in mid-June and you're hoping live transcription is going to be there, that's not what we want you to be doing. Plan it as it works today, realizing that these timelines reflect the resources that are available when they made that date, and that they aren't going to run into any showstopper bugs as they're doing the deployment. If they end up running into issues during the deployment, that absolutely can change it by a couple of days to a couple of months. So important to realize that this is the best information we have at the time, and roadmap dates are subject to change.
Okay, and as long as you've said that, and I'm going to be a little bit like John and Rajiv and interview you a little bit. My customers were asking me 3 weeks ago about our expanding Teams meeting capacity from 300 to 1,000. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so 1,000-person meetings is part of our collection of features that largely we're calling webinars. Although when we talk about webinars, we're usually talking about meeting registration. There are a bunch of other things that make Teams meetings a better tool for handling webinars in addition to meeting registration. One of them is the increased capacity. So as of May 12th, any Teams meeting that you host can have 1,000 interactive participants in it. So this is already released. It's already available in your tenant. There's nothing you need to go, an administrator needs to go and do to make it have that capacity. So 1,000-person interactive Teams meetings are available today. Now there are some caveats we call out. Where you see XL meetings, that means extra large meetings, like, hey, when we went to 1,000 meetings, breakout rooms are not supported in extra large meetings today. So if you have a meeting that you go into ahead of time and set up a breakout room, you won't be able to have more than 300 participants in it. Flip side, if you're in a meeting and you've got you and 999 of your closest friends in it, and you're like, hey, let's do a breakout room, that button will be grayed out because you're in an extra large meeting. And today, extra large meetings don't support breakout rooms. Will you be able to do that in the future? Absolutely. But we do have an iterative release process that we would rather get 1,000-way meetings out and not be able to do breakout meetings, breakout rooms in them than wait for every checkbox to be checked. So, yep, there's more to this. Make sure you as you're communicating that, make sure people understand that caveat, so they're not planning a department-wide meeting with breakout rooms where they're going to have 700 people in there. We want people to know that, so we've tried to clearly communicate that in all of our different message center posts and wrote. I think even the public blog post called that out as well. But it's there today, so good question, Laura.
Well, and thank you, Nash, because just to clarify, the customer in question was on the fence between, do I have a live event or do I, where they wanted to add audio and have, more of an interactive meeting. They have 800 people and it was an all hands scenario. So they were right. They were below the 1,000, but they weren't really wanted to have the possibility for people to come off mute for at least the first 300. So thank you very much for the detail on that explanation.
Yeah, that's a great example of if you're planning an event like that. Until it was live, I wouldn't have planned to do a meeting for it. Now that it's live, instead of doing a live event, I would have done a Teams meeting for it. I will call out another feature that's already released and available to GCC, and that's the view-only attendee experience, which is a lot like a live event. And this is what allows us to go from 1,000-person meetings that are interactive to let the 1,001 person through today the 20,000th person, which actually would be the 21,000th-ish person. Follow the bouncing ball here, to see a view-only experience of the meeting. So for an all-hands meeting where I want it to potentially be interactive, but we're going to have lots and lots and lots of people that might see it. The first 1,000 people will be in the interactive portion of the meeting, and everybody else after that would be in the view-only experience. It's much more like a live event. This feature, while it's released today, it was released off by default. We released this one off by default to ensure that people could communicate the caveats of this, so that if they start planning to do a 20,000-person meeting, they understand that those people in the view-only experience are only going to see the active speaker camera and or the screen sharing. They're not going to see the gallery view today. We do plan to bring the full Teams attendee experience to the view-only experience in the future, but at launch, it's going to be the basic experience, like if you remember a couple months ago what it was like to join a Teams meeting in a browser before we had gallery and the web experience. It's going to be the single video only of the active speaker and any content that's shared today. So definitely an iterative process. This is good for now, and it's going to keep getting better and better as the next couple of months move on. So, all right.
You want another question?
I do. I'm looking. I see Stacy.
Is there an
replying to one
option to
here.
have a sign-in feature in meetings?
Yeah. So today, Teams meetings don't natively have a sign-in feature, but there are other things that exist today and will exist in the future. So what exists today is the ability to use the lobby to prevent people from just joining until they've been admitted. And that's been there forever. The lobby option to go and say only me, and then everybody else would have to be admitted, which would give you the ability to go and like check them off a list. Additionally, meeting the webinars feature for meeting registration would mean they can't get the meeting link until they go and register for it. So that's the one though that we're not going to probably see until late June, early July at the earliest though. So other tools exist though, like if you want, if you're doing a training class and you want to simulate the sign-in sheet that people would have filled out when they walked in the room, Microsoft Forms is a really good tool for that. So you can go and create a Microsoft form and share the form link in chat with people and say, hey, go put your name in here and your sign-in time, so that you end up with the list of people who intentionally signed in while they were there. Maybe a third thing to talk about that would be the attendee list. The organizer of a meeting today can download a snapshot essentially of the meeting participant list. Today that comes down as a CSV file and just looks like it's a list of all of the people who are in the meeting at that point in time. So that would be another way to get a sign-in list of who was there at that point. The downside of it as today is number one, only the meeting organizer can do it. Number two, they can only do it during the meeting. But that's one that I don't think it's in our deck yet. It's not, the release isn't imminent, but they were trying to get this one done by the end of June. Is it participants list or attendee list? New experience for the participant roster. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's in the message center yet. So we don't have a public date for that one yet. But it is coming, and once that new feature comes, again, that one's late June. If we can get it out the door, that would allow the organizer to grab it after the meeting is done, and it gives you just more of a meeting entry and exit log. So you get the running list of so and so joined for from 2:10 to 2:18, and then they came back for the last 30 seconds. Like that would be a log of everybody as they came in and came out of the meeting. So I hope one of those options as it exists today or as will exist in the near future would solve the whatever particular business reason you were looking for people to be able to sign into a meeting. And if not, feel free to add more into the Q&A for specifics on what you're really hoping to accomplish, and maybe we can come up with some other creative solutions. So.
Well, and I was right there with you, Nash. I was even going to say, if you would like to share your contact info, we can match you with a CSM and not publish your contact info. So feel free to put your information in the Q&A, and we'll follow up with you one-on-one.
Awesome.
And I will say, just from my own experience as well, especially for things like city council or public-oriented events, the approach with forms has been really helpful, because in those cases, they've actually used a Teams live event to manage the potential scale. But based on the RSVP information, they've been able to give very select additional access to the live event. So the forms concept in conjunction with Teams can give you a ton of flexibility around knowing who's coming in your lobby, giving them different access rights and that kind of thing. So just want to pitch Forms. Forms is one of the easiest, most flexible, fun tools. I just love it for so many use cases.
So while there are still several things on the roadmap that'll make a Teams meeting the best solution for a public meeting, like a meeting where you've got an open meetings law requirement to let the public see it, and maybe you need public participation, but you still need to be able to prevent hijacking of the meeting. We're getting pretty close to having all of the things that you would want there, but right now we do have all of the things that you need for that process. We have a session also on Wednesdays during this time where we do cover, I think, every third week, doing public events with the example of, hey, you've got a governor's press conference, or the board of land investment public meeting that needs to be broadcast with an open meeting law requirement. That webinar Wednesdays session has every third week that as a topic where we go through all the different ways we would use the meeting options to go and plan that out and execute it, using the product as it is today, and cover the latest updates on some of the things that we would like to have, like multi-spotlight and all that kind of fun stuff. So that you know when those are coming. I don't know if one of my peers will throw the aka.ms/webinar Wednesdays link in the Q&A for people. No sign up for that. You can just feel free to come. But yeah. All right. Keep calling out the Q&A things as we're going along. I don't see more items sitting unanswered in the Q&A, so I'll keep looking at the things that have just come out to keep letting people know. One-to-one call recording is available today, but it is off by default, meaning if I do a Teams call to my peer Glenn and we want to record that session, if this policy is enabled, you'll have a recording button just like if it were a Teams meeting that we recorded. This works for Teams calls today. And in the future, there will be an ability to do this for folks who are using the Teams phone system. It does play a notification. This meeting is now being recorded, but super useful feature for trying to help build a training session with somebody, or trying to record something for clarity or make it easy to refer back to later on. Off by default, IT's got to turn that one on. Notification settings. We finally have the notification setting controls that commercials had for a little bit here, which makes it a lot easier for you to go and either turn up the volume on something you really care about, or turn down the volume on things that you need access to the information, but man, you don't need that sending a notification all the time. That one's been alive since the beginning of the month, and you'll notice the new parent level settings for that just in your Teams settings under the notification piece. Attendee audio pieces, we just got this recently where you are able to allow to unmute when you've got your hard mute settings without the person first raising their hand. When we first launched this, the prevent attendees from unmuting feature, it was either all on or all off, and then if you wanted a single person to be a single attendee to be unmuted, they had to raise their hand first, which in many contexts was kind of a too many steps. So at this point, if you've got if you've turned off the ability for attendees to unmute, you can right click on an individual attendee and allow to unmute without them first raising their hand. Teams live events, you can now set a policy that will never record a live event. Right now, by default, a live event will be recorded. And if you need a policy in place in your tenant to prevent that from happening, that exists today. We already talked about moving to 1,000-person meetings. You and 999 of your closest friends, go for it. Have that heck of a birthday party on a Teams meeting. Breakout rooms functionality. This one on the 19th, so like last week, there were a couple of changes here, and there are more changes coming to breakout rooms in the near future. But for the functionality we lit up last week, we do have the ability to retain room assignment. So if you've got a recurring meeting or a recurring class, those breakout rooms will persist across multiple sessions there. You can reassign somebody once the rooms are open. So if you accidentally assigned your boss to room B and you want them to be in room C, go ahead and do that. And then thirdly, we've got a timer. So the timer will let people know when the meeting's supposed to close. It'll give them a banner up at the top, makes it a little bit easier. There is more coming for breakout rooms. Not that's I think in this deck yet because we don't have a message center post, but do realize that your top asks, like the ability to go and have someone other than the organizer manage breakout rooms, is being actively developed on right now. And we hope to have line of sight on when that's going to be shipped to production in the very near future. Again, it's in that bucket of things that we're shooting for late June, early July for. All right. Breakout rooms, great stuff. I love seeing their iterations through this. Out of office and Teams is there now. This again was a last week feature. So in addition to being able to set a status message in Teams, you can go and leverage the out of office piece and set up automatic replies here. This is a great way to be able to manage it from either here or on the Outlook side with your out of office. We'll roll on our emoji picker. Got a very, very requested update inside of Teams. You'll notice that the picker itself has a bunch more options, especially for using short codes. But you'll also notice that if you're using any of the people-based ones, that there is now a skin tone selection. So I think the people-based ones is the third icon in, and anywhere that you see this little dot over it will allow you to switch your skin tone on that. So we're not all looking like Bart Simpson when we go into our emojis in there in our communications now. So all of your millennial coworkers will rejoice at being able to have more emoji options. Good stuff. Teams with templates. This one I'm actually going to say, hey, we may be wrong on this one. It started to roll last week, but I don't think we're done rolling it yet. So you may not see this today in your tenant. You might only see the back end if you're a Teams administrator, but you might not see the front end of it yet. I forget. Laura, Stacy, Glenn, did you hear what percentage they're at for GCC tenants? I know they're not done. I just don't know if it's like 10% or 25%. I know Mornay said the other day, I just don't remember.
He said 25%.
25%, yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry. So I'm guessing 50 by now, but again, that was just based on him saying they were coming out pretty quickly. But
yeah, I mean, I didn't go and look after that to see if it's even in my demo tenant. That when he said it, it was not in my demo tenant, but now I'm curious. Teams. All right, I've got the templates there in my demo tenant. So the templates allow us to go and when we enable end users to create their own teams, give them an example team to start with. So if you deal with things like emergency management, you might want a template for a new team when you're dealing with a new incident. That template lets you go and predefine channels, predefine tabs, so that when I create the team, it's already got that stuff. So if you're using the incident command system, you might have a command channel, you might have an operations section channel or an air branch or ground branch channel. Makes it super easy to go and enable end users to create teams that aren't just a blank sheet of paper. Microsoft provides a bunch of templates by default. Right, onboard employees, adopt Office 365 for your champions one, organize your help desk. An example for a hospital ward or a quality and safety program. There's a couple that won't apply super often, like retail or organize your store, but there's always the exception. So this is a great one to have. And again, it's all about, we want to make it easy for end users that are creating their own teams to be able to go and have something that doesn't require them to imagine what one of these things would look like. If they've got something here that is a little bit like it, it gives them a starting point, so it's not a blank sheet of paper. That is at about 50% today, we think. Well, for sure it was 25% a couple of days ago. So good stuff. Watch for more on this front in the future. Together mode.
We do have a question that I think might be helpful to talk through. Is there any way to set up a demo meeting with a virtual attendee or another person? Like you and I have a demo tenant, But if someone's in a production environment, is there any way to emulate someone else being in your meeting so that you don't have to, impose on a coworker to practice using Microsoft Teams? Is that?
Yes.
Have you thought about something like that?
Love the question. Thank you for asking that. I want to do that one live. I've got two solutions for you. One that solves the need of, hey, I need to make sure my camera works, my video works. And that's the ability to go and make a test call, which, oh my goodness, let's keep me honest. Let me just go and double check. I'm pretty sure if you go up to the top search/command bar and type /test call, you can do that today in the desktop client. But I'm going to quick double check because I don't want to guess. But that test call functionality gives you the ability to go and speak, and it will tell you at the end, did it hear you? And it'll let you test your webcam. So it'll play back the recording of what you do in that process. So this was a feature that didn't quite exist fully the last time I looked, but I'm pretty sure it's there now. Test. Yep. So there we go. So I'm going to pull up my GCC demo tenant. If I go up to the search bar and hit /test call, it will let me go through the process of, oh man, okay. Maybe it won't. Maybe it won't. All right. Well, we're going to take that right off the table. Looks like we're not done releasing this yet. Forget everything I just said. It's not over here either. Make a test call. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you just can't do the /test call.
To test your call quality.
Okay. And so it's going to essentially call a bot. That bot is going to say, hey, record a message. I don't have a mic hooked up on this VM, but it would let you go and see your video and record it and then play the video back. So that's a good start. But I think the question did include things like screen sharing. We can do something else to give you the ability to more interactively see both sides of a conversation. And that's just by the nature of the fact that anyone can join a Teams meeting, including an anonymous person. And that anonymous person could be you wearing a different hat. So while I'm in a Teams meeting, and right now I'm using my Teams desktop client to join the Teams live event, at any point you can go and take that meeting join link for a meeting that you only invited yourself to. And you can open that up in a web browser, not as your signed in user, but using the in private browser window or incognito window if you're using Chrome to join that meeting as another person and see both sides of the conversation. So if I were to try to go and join, this live event, I would end up seeing the attendee view in this in private window. If I was trying to join a Teams meeting, I would end up joining as an anonymous external viewer. By default, I get thrown in the lobby and have to get admitted. But this other browser window would be a great way to go and be able to hear the audio. And do realize if you're using Chrome or Edge, you can mute the tabs so you don't hear the echo from both your desktop client and this, but also you'd be able to see the webcam that's being shared and see any screen sharing in that other browser. So I do this all the time when I'm doing training because I want to be one person chatting with another person or one person in a meeting with another person. So I might have my browser window on one side and in private on the other, just to be able to show both halves of the conversation. That's a great way to go and solve wanting to be able to see and practice screen sharing and see what it looks like on the other end as an attendee in your meeting. Laura, does that sound like a good answer?
The other tip on that, I would just say, yes, those are all great tricks. I also invite my Gmail to meetings and do the same thing with the browser so that I have an identity. And then just the last little call I'll make about joining as anonymous or joining as an external party. When you're wondering if someone should have chat or not, or should have emojis or those kinds of things, the limitations may be on the fact that you are an external participant or using a browser instead of a client. So just be aware of there may be some inherent limitations in testing that way, but you should be able to see all the features from your own identity and your own client while you have these other people, fictional people joining.
Love it. Okay, it is 2:26 Central Time. There are a lot more slides here of things that have come out. So together mode's no longer in preview. We've got a new experience for the the participant roster. We've got a new way to go and manage installed apps inside the admin center. We now have apps in meetings directly integrated. So if you want to go and do the Poly piece, or you're using Monday.com, or you're using Asana, you can bring those apps into the meeting context, and we have a lot more coming on that. We've got custom backgrounds in mobile. We've got the idea of using supervised chat. So if you've got things like kids that have an identity in your tenant, or places where you don't want people to be able to chat one-on-one with each other, you've got the ability to go and control that. This is all stuff that's been released since early April, and we're up to like 24-ish slides on that. And these are big features that warranted a message center post. There are also lots of small feature tweaks. That was a lot to cover. We got a lot more coming in Q2, meaning between now and the end of next month. So where we had 26 there, we've got another 30 to 40 things that we are trying to get out before the end of June. And this deck goes on for a long ways here. I'm going to call out a couple of the big ones that we care about. So we're going to see additional lobby settings for only invited users, which will be really important on some of those public meetings to make sure that internal people to your org can't necessarily accidentally join a meeting or hijack a meeting. They always end up in the lobby, but the people who are supposed to be there will get it. So if somebody forwarded the calendar invite or shared the link, they're always going to end up in that meeting. So we're looking forward to that one coming out hopefully very soon. They're hoping to have the deployment started at about mid-May. The polls, meeting polls in Teams using the Microsoft Forms integration. This one, I don't know if it's going to start rolling at the end of the month here or not. They're working really hard to get this one out the door. But since we're late in May, maybe it's going to end up being in June. But the ability to just natively do a poll is coming very, very, very shortly to GCC. The ability to prevent attendees from sharing their video is also hopefully coming very, very shortly here. They ran into some challenges on quality that are being worked through right now. But this is another one if you manage public meetings, to make sure that attendees can't share inappropriate video or gesticulate wildly to distract from your meeting. That's coming very shortly here. One of the things your end users are going to love the most is the dynamic view for meetings, so that if you're in a meeting with 20 people, you don't always see the 3x3 9 squares and only like 2 people have their video on. It will, if only 2 people have their video on, or 3 or 4 or 5, it's going to dynamically scale just those videos and give a much more beautiful view into the meeting, as well as give you the ability to better show video and content together. The calling experience, PowerPoint Live with slide translation, translations, the Praise app coming, call merge, multiple spotlights. So if you're going to have 3 main presenters, make sure that all 3 are on there, or maybe it's a main presenter and an ASL interpreter coming as well. We got just a ton of things that are going to impact that meeting experience that people are going to love. I'm just scrolling through here to call out some of the greatest hits. The new planner experience integrated with To Do, hopefully coming by mid-June. The Tasks app is where you'll see most of that surfaced. Let's see, if you do a lot of live events, getting that live event into a separate window should be out by the end of the month here. That one sounds like it's on track. Joining a Teams meeting with a digital ID. So you just want to share the code with people instead of sharing that long meeting link. That'll be an option here by this summer. The ability to go and get a non-signed in user as a presenter in a live event. I don't know if this one's going to hit by the end of May or not. But again, if you're using Teams live events for public facing events, you need to pull in an external person for a presenter. The ability to not have to worry about their identity, either as a federated user or as a guest user, will be a really nice feature. Make that a lot easier for people. The Approvals app is hopefully coming here within the next couple of days. Live transcription we already talked about. org-wide Teams meeting backgrounds. I think this is going to end up being part of that advanced communications license, so not everybody's going to own that right away. New share window coming, create tasks directly from chat coming shortly. Locked meetings, so when you lock a meeting, it'll prevent anyone else from coming in until you unlock it. Love it. And it just goes on and on and on. Were there any other questions in the chat that we want to make sure we answer live? Otherwise, you got the link to this. You can go and check this. And remember, we're updating this thing every week, typically on Monday, with anything that we've either gotten in the message center or that we've heard from engineering to answer some of the questions that we're getting from our customers. We're trying to make sure we keep this as up to date and as useful as possible. But yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff coming in the roadmap. Keep giving us the feedback and helping us make Teams into the thing that helps you get your job done, whether it's communicating or collaborating either in real time or when it's convenient. We're trying to make sure it does all the things that you need it to do to help accomplish the mission of your organization.